Hopefully this is working now. I'm gonna just let people know in the chat room that we are working live here. So tonight is interesting because they're basically you're just trying to decide between Kershaw and Strasburg, I think, for cash games, right? So you're saying to yourself, what's to believed about Kershaw and what's necessarily to be believed about Strasburg, because they've had kind of fluctuating seasons so far, to say the least. Really, they have Strasburg's last two games have been excellent, but leading up until the last game, he really wasn't looking that good. And meanwhile, Kershaw has been, great at times, and last game he got lit up by the Cubs. So money line has moved pretty significantly against Kershaw in the last, I would say, 30 minutes. It went from around a 7 over under to an 8 over under, with a lot of that money coming in, or excuse me, a lot of those runs, at least 10% of the runs coming in on the Milwaukee side of the ball, which really did lower his projection some. And that's a little bit concerning, right? Because when you have a guy like him and you see drastic movement late game, right? Like late, we're now 2 hours or so away from game time. That usually means heavy money is coming in from somewhere that's kind of influencing the line. So I'm a little concerned with that. He's still a guy that's he's in 100% of our DraftKings lineups. It's a little bit closer on FanDuel, where Strasburg has actually started to sneak in to the discussion now. So I think that's where I can see a scenario where I'm playing maybe mostly Strasburg, mostly Kershaw, and just a little bit of Strasburg, just as a natural kind of hedge, let's say. But I am just a little bit concerned with kind of where Kershaw's overall, just where his overall projection has gone in the last little bit. I'm trying to move my screen up a little bit there, but we'll see. It's gonna be interesting as we get a little bit closer. I need to see the Oakland batting lineup tonight before I can really make an overall decision, because they have been striking out a lot this season. If they load up on, they don't really have a lot of lefties they can turn to begin with, but if they load up on a lineup that actually strikes out a little bit more than their expectation has been this season, then we're definitely looking at a situation where Strasburg does jump into the cash game discussion. I'm just scrolling through some of the chat here to see any questions. I'll probably end up going back over this in a little bit, but there are a couple of things to watch out for here tonight. One, the weather in Houston and Texas looks pretty bad, so we're probably going to want to avoid that. None of those guys are coming in on the main slate lineups, so I'm not so worried there. They are in the express lineups, just because you have Darvish and you have Darvish and Keuchel pitching there, and those are the two best arms on that slate. But the weather's looking pretty bad there, so I'm probably going to end up avoiding it. Right now, I think, if you're using our system, it's pretty much, not to say that we're completely set, but the lineups, at least on FanDuel, have been pretty much the same for the most of the day here. They really haven't changed much. I usually take that as a pretty good sign for stability's sake, that the system is just kind of honed in on what it wants to do. Kershaw, and then it's got a couple of these Detroit guys like Machado and Castellanos hitting pretty high in the lineup. It's pretty much all 100% in on Stanton, and there's like kind of a smattering of other names. Just gonna let people know where this is streaming is. Yes, hit play. I'm talking. this, for those that are watching here, this is a pretty new thing. So we're trying to figure out the best way to kind of have this go pretty seamlessly up on the site, so people that know where it is. But so, LJ was or Big Baller Brand was asking what I'm talking about. I'm just trying to talk about some of the tech things we're working on here. But anyway, so it's been pretty set on a lot of these guys for most of the day, like Machado, Castellanos, Stanton, Cameron Rupp looks like he's in a great spot. I think Matt Adams is pretty much a chalk play, at least on FanDuel tonight at 2,600. Braves are projected to put up a lot of runs for them, considering that they're pretty bad, even especially without Freeman. I mean, Kemp's put up a pretty nice season, kind of out of nowhere. A lot of that is run hot on the BABIP and a little bit on the home run to fly ball ratio. So I'm not totally willing to buy the Kemp thing where he's just now all of a sudden a 1,000 OPS guy going forward, but this is the Braves are still in a good spot, and Adams is definitely coming cheap. So I definitely think you see him. I definitely think you see him as, I don't know, maybe in that 50 to 60% ownership range on FanDuel tonight at 2,600. I think you probably should see the same thing for a guy like Machado at 2,200. Detroit has a great implied run line, and you're getting him at the minimum hitting leadoff, and that's kind of like the dream situation, right? Like we talked about this before about why batting lineup batting lineup order and where you slot in matters so much, because just that plate appearance expectation kind of just goes through the roof when you're the guy hitting leadoff. It's not rocket science. You are going to get the most plate appearances on your team. Machado 2,200. He's no great shakes in terms of offense, but if he's just going to hit in front of guys like Castellanos, Cabrera, and the Martinez guys, and then even Upton, the lineup now goes pretty deep against Derek Holland, who's pretty garbagey. So if the percentage of people in cash that aren't playing guys like Machado and Castellanos, who are both, you spend a combined 4,800 on them, you got to feel pretty good about it, because this is exactly the situation you're looking for, especially when you have to roster up at least, you're at least playing Strasburg or Kershaw, right? Like, so I can't imagine. I can understand the debate between one of them. I cannot understand the debate between both of them, like to go somewhere else. So, garbage is new. No, the garbage is bad. That's been a long time. James and Doug adding Y's to things just is the new way to kind of formulate your own words. So anyway, I think we're gonna see, at least in terms of ownership on FanDuel, because they just haven't price corrected some of these guys. Those Adams, Machado, Castellanos, you're gonna see those guys pretty heavily owned. Our system wants to pay up here for Stanton. I get that. He's in a good spot here. He's I think our highest overall points guy. Right, yeah. So it's pretty clear why, right? Patrick Corbin is a fly ball pitcher, and Stanton for his career has just absolutely crushed lefties. So you get him hitting second. They finally have moved him back up in the order, which makes a ton of sense. And it'll be interesting to see how much people want to pay for him here. 4,100 is not cheap, right? So you're not necessarily getting away with anything on Stanton, but he's in just such a great spot. The A's lineup just came out, so we're gonna see if we can refresh our data set and get this in, and it will be interesting to see what happens here with some of these A's guys, because if this changes the strikeout expectation for, I can see Chris is updating or making sure that lineup is locked and loaded into the system. But if this changes the strikeout expectation on the A's, I think I had them in somewhere like if let's say if it raises it by 4% or something like that, which is reasonable. I don't know what all these guys' strikeout numbers are in this split, and it kind of matters for batting order. Like the way we set up our system is, you get batting order and then you get K expectation based on how many times you're going to reach the plate, just to give you a little idea of how we come up with some of these projections. But this could definitely change Strasburg's projection here in a second. Probably helps. It doesn't help him as much that Kanha isn't in the lineup. He was kind of a strikeout machine, I believe. Davis will strike out as you get to the bottom of the lineup. I mean, the A's lineup is bad, right? So I'm not trying to make a case for this A's lineup at all. It's kind of just going to matter where the strikeout multiplier comes in for a guy like Strasburg. I look like Seth Green. I never got that one before. I've gotten Jason Statham when I was a little skinnier. I'm not really as ripped as Statham, but I guess I'll take Seth Green. I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure if that's a compliment or not. I want to believe that's a compliment. I'll just take it as a compliment because he's famous. But again, I suppose there's worse guys to be compared to. On DraftKings, right now, if I was to make lineups right this second for cash games, the system has German Marquez, not as a universal starting pitcher too, but pretty damn close. 84% of the lineups he's coming in on. I am not comfortable running him in, let's say, 84% of my cash game lineups. I think I could see a situation where I go something like 60% Marquez, 20% Pineda, 20% Fulmer, and Pineda's the guy he strikes me as probably a little bit more of a tournament guy, but he's been goddamn good this season. Pineda's numbers we mentioned on the podcast today, but he basically has the same peripherals as Strasburg this season. Like something like 10 Ks per nine, less than 2 walks per nine. He's facing a Blue Jays team that's clearly not they were like replacement level guys when Donaldson and Tulo were out, but with those guys back, their lineup is significantly better. So you really can't take full season numbers to base any projections on the Blue Jays. Like you need to kind of take current form, which is a little bit harder in baseball, but I guess not as hard as you would think. So, but Pineda, his numbers are so good, and he's kind of finally putting it back together like what he was doing in Seattle. And I want to believe it, but at the same time, it's a little nerve-wracking thinking about putting him into the starting pitcher to slot on DraftKings exclusively too. So I think, like I said, I go Marquez 60%, Fulmer 20%. I like him in the spot he's in, and then 20% on Pineda, and I think I would feel pretty good about that. Someone's asking, would you go Pineda over Fulmer? Nah, I think I'd play them the same. I don't think one's better than the other. I think like Pineda has more downside than Fulmer because just because that Toronto lineup is just probably it can do a little bit more damage than the White Sox lineup, just kind of top to bottom. But so I think if it was cash, I would go. I mean, I'm playing both in cash, so I'm just like not exactly. I know that you want me to pick somebody, but I just don't. It's hard to pick. They're like kind of in a coin flip territory to me, but kind of for different reasons, right? Like one just has more upside than the other. Let's see if. Just want to see if this last update did anything to Strasburg's projection with the A's. The A's striking out. I have a feeling that it's going to lower Strasburg's projection just a little bit, actually, because the strikeout numbers on some of these guys are just a little bit lower than what we had originally for the A's team as a whole. I kind of kept it the same. So no real movement on Strasburg. I don't know if I still think right now, if I was making my FanDuel lineups, I think I would do something like 80% Kershaw, 20% Strasburg, and I don't feel too terrible about the hedge, mostly because you get just that little bit of more offense with Strasburg, because you save the 1,200 there on FanDuel, and I think I'm probably okay with that. Although, I mean, we have about 45 minutes left. I'll probably end up having to make a closer decision once we get there. Right now, FanDuel is showing 100% of Kershaw lineups because I guess that did lower Strasburg's. It maybe did lower Strasburg's projection just enough to get him out of the lineup. So we'll have to kind of maybe I'll take a little bit closer look just right leading into lock about whether or not I feel good about that. It's one of those things where you definitely want to. If I had to guess ownership percentages right now, I probably would say, Kershaw sits like in the 65 to 70% range. I do not think he's going to be that 80 to 90% start that we've seen some of these other elite pitchers, mostly because Strasburg exists here on the slate. And then and that's where I think that we just see a little bit, his ownership levels a little bit lower. In terms of GPPs, so right now, in terms of points per dollar, just straight points per dollar value for the for tournaments. Our system, Well, the runaway favorite is Milwaukee, right? Because they have this absolutely ridiculous. This is FanDuel. This absolutely ridiculous pricing algorithm with Kershaw. It's so maddening that they do this. That they just kind of make all these guys sub $2,000 players, and then kind of make it so they have these sub guys, like, everyone's 1,700, 1,800, and you kind of just make you have to decide whether you want to play them or not. The line moving into for the Brewers here, like up to around, we have them around 3.2 implied runs. That's almost good enough to just take the chance, because the points per dollar that you get on this team is the highest I've ever seen in terms of our system. Like right now it's 4.84. That no team is ever over 4 just to start, right? So the fact that they're butting up against 5 seems totally insane to me, but it's because they've just gone totally haywire with these prices. I probably end up. I usually don't do. I know some people like to do like hedge stacks when they have a pitcher. They like to hedge against them. They like to hedge against the pitcher just because. I don't know. Just because they think they want to hedge it. I personally don't usually subscribe to that, but this is a case where I will do it because, like I said, this points per dollar is a whole points per dollar higher than the next closest team, which is Detroit. So I will have a little bit of like a Strasburg, Milwaukee, and then probably like Detroit, because Detroit's the next highest team on FanDuel. And actually, it's really Milwaukee and Detroit. Detroit is a lot higher than the next team, which is Philadelphia and Cincinnati. So I think what I'm going to do for FanDuel, at least tonight, is do a little bit of Milwaukee stacking and probably just allow that to stack with the best overall raw points guys available. Not really kind of locking in on a different team just because they're so cheap. I think you can get away with that strategy. And then I'm going to do some Detroit and Cincinnati double stacking and probably throw in a little bit of Atlanta too and mix up the Kershaw Strasburg and possibly throw in maybe just have a couple other like random arms, like have a Pineda in there just on the strikeout upside. I will avoid the Keuchel and Darvish thing because I'm a little bit worried about weather, so I don't think that's really necessarily worth it. On DraftKings, where they did not go out of their brain and make just a completely ridiculous pricing algorithm that just changes the prices for one player when you face one player, which I just find a very, very silly concept and very silly just strategy in general. There, it's Detroit and Philadelphia, sort of standing heads and tails above the rest in terms of what you get points per dollar wise. Detroit, the thing with Detroit is Machado helps that so much. The fact that he's hitting the top of the lineup, he actually really just does, as a whole team, boost their overall points per dollar almost on his own because he's so cheap and hitting leadoff in that spot against Holland. But again, the team in general is in a good spot, so I think you feel pretty good. About Detroit. I kind of like it I like it a little bit better when the system calls out different teams on different sites. So in this case, it's Detroit on both sites. Mostly because I do like to have. I'd rather hedge. This is where I take my hedges, is just like in pricing differences between the two sites. That's not really going to be the case. Then it's kind of all in on Detroit, which I think I'm fine with. So someone on the chat was saying, asking about Eric Thames in lineup 1 on. We're just playing Eric Thames. It's interesting. He's been good. He's been able to hit lefties this year. He went through a little bit of a power downturn over a couple weeks, and then he's kind of picked it back up of late. I think you probably see some people actually play him just because of the price, and if you take one of these just like total punt guys, like 1,700 punt guys, and you throw him in with Machado, then you kind of are just fine playing anybody you want, even with the Kershaw 12-4 price tag. Right now, Thames doesn't come into our lineups on FanDuel until lineup 8. So it's basically all Matt Adams up until that point. And then right around lineup 8, you get a little bit of Thames. And get a little bit, I thought you got a little bit of Keon Broxton at some point. Yeah, you get a little Keon Broxton too, somewhere around lineup 9 or 10. Just because he's like in that same situation, hitting leadoff. That guy is an absolute strikeout machine. I think he Ks like something like 40% of the time, which is just totally ridiculous. Totally ridiculous number. So I'm just going to answer a couple of these questions in chat. Tell people that we're talking live here. If anyone has any questions, you can definitely throw them into the live chat here. I can try to answer them. This is a pretty good night. I'm going to jump out of here probably at about 6:30 so I can make sure that I get lineups in time. We did have one of our users take down the 11K in the slugger yesterday on FanDuel, which I thought was pretty awesome. Yeah, taking down, that's just he was playing single entry, higher stakes single entry, which is a nice place to use the optimal lineups in terms of just like using the top lineup, because single entry one, you're not going to run into just like these crazy 150 lineup trains that you're going to run into like in the $3 lineups. You get your money in a little bit better in the single entry higher buy-ins, just because you are able to. You're just not. It's just so hard to like in the $3 lineups. Let's say you have to hit the absolute nuts to be able to win, and that is as much of a dart throw as anything. You reduce the variance in your dart throws by entering a ton of lineups, but you still need to enter a ton of lineups. On the bigger buy-ins, maybe $25, $100 or higher ones, you sure are taking a hit up front on the amount that you have to buy in, but but you're not running into just these max entering guys that are just going to really make it tough for you. Not to mention just the amount of overall combinations you have to beat when there's 30,000 plus entries in a single tournament. It's very, very difficult to win like that. So we've had users tell us that they're having a lot of, and I've had this kind of success. Not this season hitting the top end payout like that, but in the past, in the smaller entries with bigger buy-ins, you're kind of able to realize some of the upside a little bit quicker than you are trying to compete with a field of 40,000 entries or so. So anyway, he took down 11 grand yesterday in the early only. It was early only FanDuel, and it was kind of Wilmer Flores was the story there. So I put up a quick article about it on the site, which was a nice thing. Always like when users are able to take down big scores like that. Makes everyone feel pretty damn good about it. I think we have most of the lineups in here. I think we're waiting on Washington. We're waiting on Washington and a couple of the other 10 o'clock games, like the late games. That would be the Twins. Yeah, I guess it's only the Twins and the Nats we're waiting for tonight. The other thing that kind of hurts, speaking of Nats, the other thing that kind of hurts Strasburg tonight, it's actually not his fault. It's Bryce Harper's fault for getting suspended. That money line for him is only minus 134 for Strasburg. I really believe that if Harper was playing, we would see that money line somewhere in like the minus 155 to minus 160 range. That's really what kind of difference a guy like Harper makes, just because he's the second best player in the game after Trout. And when Trout is hurt, he's the best player in the game. So a guy like that does make a big difference in terms of money line, where you can, and that hurts Strasburg's win expectation. And that matters, right? So, I know wins are binary. You either get it or you don't. So it's not like strikeout expectation, these other things, which you can kind of put on a scale. We do scale wins because, you can't just give someone the full win share, just because that's just not really how it works. So we do kind of break down win shares based on money lines and expected innings pitched, and to kind of figure out how many points we need to assign for a win. But that's hurting Strasburg, that if you're in that almost $12,000 range and you're only a minus 130 money line, you're just not getting enough win expectation. So that's the other thing that kind of hurts him tonight. If we saw that climb to 150, we're not going to see a climb this late in the game. But if it were at that 150, 155 sort of area, then for sure he would be even closer in part of the discussion for cash. All right, I think that I'm going to jump out of here so I can get some lineups in. I'll be in the chat room answering some questions for leading up until lock, but we're going to keep trying the live streaming, and we'll keep trying the live streaming on most nights of the week, where we're just kind of here and we're monitoring the system and we're putting in lineups ourselves, so it makes sense. And then I'd love to get feedback for those of you that were listening, and we had I think 10 or so watchers right now. Would love feedback on what you'd like to hear, what we could talk about, what would spice it up a little bit, something we're trying out. So definitely, we've always gotten really solid feedback on stuff like this. And whenever we try something new, I want to make sure that it's what everyone kind of wants. So I'm going to jump out of here, and I'll be in the chat room and answering some more questions. And enjoy your Friday night, and I'll see you in the chat room in a couple minutes.